might be a bit of an easy subject with this kind of a crowd, say morality without God. A lot of kind of like nodding heads. So what I want to talk about is actually take a little bit of a different spin on the idea of morality without God, and argue that to some extent there is an aspect of understanding morality where God plays actually a really important role and has played. The idea of a God has played a really important role throughout history. And if you surgically extract God from morality, as a lot of people these days want to do, including myself, it does actually raise a problem that is not necessarily that straightforward to solve. So we need to try to figure out how, if God does play this important role that I'm going to talk about, how we can then build a morality without God, without slipping into what is often, this is where Dostoevsky is often misquoted as saying, without God, anything goes. And I'm going to explain what I mean by all that in just a minute. So, what does God have to do with morality in the first place? Now, there's the obvious aspect of God being the creator and the purveyor of the moral rules that we live by. Now, we understand that in just about every religion there's a moral aspect to the supernatural part of things. But there's another role that God plays that I think is particularly important, which is not just the creator and the purveyor, but the enforcer of moral rules. And it's actually no accident that just about every religion has some kind of a supernatural force that is responsible for enforcing adherence to the moral system of that society. And you could be in a hunter-gatherer society, and it might be that nature exacts revenge on you for being a bad person by giving you a crap harvest. It could be that your ancestors judge you on your death to determine whether you're going to go into paradise or not. Or it could be the idea of having some kind of omniscient or all-seeing being that is watching and judging you at all times. And this is separate from the idea of the creator of the moral rules. This is something that actually enforces the moral rules. This is something that a philosopher, Philip Kitcher, has written about recently in a book that came out about a year ago, which he calls the idea of an unseen observer. Something that is not seen, but is watching us all the time and making sure that we are behaving well. So, the role of this unseen observer is, I actually think, a really important part of morality. To explain why we need to step back a little bit and look at the role that morality plays in society and plays in our lives. Now, a lot of philosophers, when they talk about morality, they talk about what morality is. Is it based upon the edicts of a deity? Is it based upon scientific fact? Is it based upon the strictures of reason? Is it based upon some kind of idea of inalienable moral rights that we have? I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to take a different approach. Instead of asking what morality is, ask what morality does. And ask the question, what is the function of morality? And that's kind of a historical question. So instead of trying to get metaphysical, you just get empirical. And you look back at what kind of a role morality has played in society. And I think that, and this is also argued by Kitcher recently, that the function of morality historically has been quite simple. It's just to facilitate social living and to facilitate cooperation and allow us to pursue our interests without just getting completely screwed over by everybody else. And that's really important because if you think about it, we are the only species of animal that cooperates in such massive, large social groups with individuals who are not directly related to us. There are other examples of cooperation in nature, but nothing like what humans have. And that's because getting this kind of level of social and cooperative interaction is really bloody hard. Mainly because everyone's pursuing their interests, so why should I help someone else if it's at my detriment, if I can't guarantee that they're going to help me back? Why, if I have an opportunity to lie, cheat and steal and advance my own interests, would I stop doing that if it's just because it's going to hurt somebody else? But we do know that living cooperatively, living socially, has tremendous benefits. This is why we're able to drink the beer we're drinking or the wine we're drinking tonight. Think about the thousands of people who are involved in that cycle of bringing it from is the raw ingredients to the tap here right now. That's all cooperation. We like cooperation. To make cooperation work, you need to have some kind of system to regulate our behaviour, to stop us from abusing each other, to stop us from taking advantage of each other. That's the function of morality. So if you say, if you take that take that as true, one of the big problems with that is set up a whole bunch of rules, saying, okay, you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't steal, even if doing so is going to, be in your short-term interests. How are you going to get people to adhere to those rules? How are you going to get people to actually obey those rules? And there are a few different ways that you can do that. Just really quickly, one of them is interesting, is the idea that we have evolved a psychology that encourages us to be nice, that encourages us to be moral. We've got these so-called moral emotions like empathy and guilt. When you do something wrong and you hurt someone else, you feel bad. That dissuades you from doing that kind of thing again. If you see someone in pain, you want to help them, and that encourages social and cooperative behaviour. But just that evolved psychology is not enough. It fails because we've also got an evolved self-interest. We've got an evolved vicious side. We've got an evolved competitive side as well. So you need another step, which is to have these rules. But then how do you enforce the rules? Well, one of the things that works is punishment. And there are a lot of studies at the moment that show that punishment of people who transgress rules actually encourages conformity to that rule system. And it's not just punishing people who transgress, but even if you punish the people who don't punish the people who transgress, you can see these rule systems start to perpetuate through the society, and everyone kind of settles in and agrees to behave nicely. So punishment seems to be a part of the story that works. So here's the problem. What about when people are behaving and acting and doing stuff when they're not being watched? Say they're in private and they come across a situation where they're able to take advantage of somebody else. I don't know, someone's left some money around or whatever it is. Or they're able to do something and they're able to do it anonymously, so no one can know that they were the person who did it. What's to stop them from breaking the rules? What's to stop them from following self-interest? What's to stop them from acting immorally, effectively? So here we come back to the idea of the unseen observer. So the idea that Kitcher and others are trying to put forward is that it was a pretty clever cultural innovation to come up with this idea that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter whether other people are around you or not, you're always being watched. And because you're always being watched, if you do something bad, you're not going to get away with it. And so the idea of the unseen observer, really, if you look at the role that God played in morality, it was just to make sure that people didn't lie, cheat and steal whenever they thought they might be able to get away with it. So now, if that's the case, and we say, okay, big problem, let's say God doesn't exist. So let's say there is actually no unseen observer. Well then, what does that mean for a moral system that otherwise looks, like any other moral system? It just doesn't have that other level of enforcement. Doesn't that mean that people are going to now lie, cheat and steal if they think that they can get away with it? And this is a fairly serious philosophical problem for secular moral systems, whether you're talking about utilitarianism or other kinds of moral systems that don't rely on a kind of objective foundation to morality. How do you get people to conform to it, particularly if they can get away with things in private? So if we take away this unseen observer, does it slip back to that Dostoevskian kind of anything goes? Do we get to this kind of moral anarchy? Well, I don't think it does. I think there is a way to solve this problem without relying on an unseen observer. And to show you how it works, we just use an analogy. Let's take law. Now, law's not like morality, and one of the ways that it's not like morality is that law is constructed. It's constructed by us. We sit down, we decide what rules we're going to obey, we decide what they're going to be, we reform them, we negotiate, we have this kind of system. So also, the law doesn't have an unseen observer. The law has seen observers, the law has other institutions that encourage us to behave and that punish us if we transgress, but they're not watching us all the time. So does that mean that people lie, cheat and steal and try to get away with whatever they can when they don't think there's any police around? Well, if you look around, we're all behaving pretty well and there are no cops in here. Or if you've ever been driving at like 3 a.m. and you pulled up at a red light and there's no other cars on the road and you still wait. So why do we do that? Well, it's interesting. It seems as though, for whatever reason, there might be a few different reasons. Maybe it's habituation. Maybe it's actually that we just like being lawful. We like the idea of living in a rule-governed, organised society where if I obey, I hope that other people obey as well. Maybe it is that we are worried that we might get caught, or we'll feel bad about it. There are a number of things that might be working here, but crucially, it works, and there's no unseen observer in there. So I think that could be a way that we can revise morality, remove God and remove all the unsavoury metaphysical baggage that comes along with a supernatural being that somehow speaks to us through some fairly dubious and circuitous means over which most people disagree, hence you get religious disagreement. I mean, if you think about it, the whole point of having a God that people, that religious moral people talk about is we've got this lovely objective foundation to morality. Well, that's nice, but it's completely undermined by the fact that, well, which objective morality is the right one? So maybe a conventionalist approach to morality is a better one anyway. Maybe if we sit down and we talk and we negotiate and we construct our moral rules from the ground up, we don't pretend that it's based upon any extraneous or transcendental thing. It's not based upon pure reason. It's something that we create. It's not actually such a bad thing after all. So we can dispense with the unseen observer, we can ditch all the metaphysical baggage, and we can have a perfectly functional moral system that isn't just going to slip into any kind of moral chaos. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.